hello, BookTube. All right, we're in part 2 of my August Q&A, and we are up to Balin321, who has 2 questions. Number 1, at one point I think you mentioned that you visited Antarctica before it became a place tourists could travel to in comfort. I did, yes, back when it was hard to do and dangerous to do. If you wouldn't mind, could you tell us more about this? It seems very interesting. It was very interesting. Antarctica was visiting another planet, as close as I will ever come to visiting another planet. You definitely felt that you were on the edge of a world, literally on the edge of an oblate spheroid. The air felt different, the gravity felt different, the sky looked completely different, the weather, of course. The weather didn't feel cold. I've been through cold in Canada and even the upper Midwest in America. I've been through cold. The weather didn't feel cold. The weather felt like the last shreds of planetary warmth were thinning out. It didn't feel cold. It felt like space. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. I actually don't know what it's like now. I'd be curious to know. You're right. You can book a cruise, all amenities included, to Antarctica now, and that wasn't true when I went. I had to stay at a science installation, and I'm wondering now what that would be like. I mean, lots of people do it every year, so I wonder how enjoyable it is. I should check on that. I'm sure that there are endless number of YouTube travel logs of people doing that. I'm sure there are. I watched a YouTube channel, the algorithm suggested it to me just yesterday, on a young couple who were going to sail across the Indian Ocean, 3,000 miles across the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles. And they were there, so they spent a month living in a broom closet, not getting enough sleep, totally dependent on the food they had in that broom closet, the water they had in that broom closet, and the notoriously fickle weather of the Indian Ocean. And they filmed the whole thing in high definition film. It was incredible. So I wondered, somebody must have done that for Antarctica. Question number 2. What do you think of the recent resurgence of Ernst Jünger in certain parts of the internet? It could be that people find him literarily fascinating. I myself do. Penguin Classics clearly does. There might be, alongside that, another element of an explanation for why he would suddenly be embraced by people, for instance, in some parts of YouTube and some parts of Reddit, who don't have any previous history of reading. Could very well be that he has some ideological stances that they're starting to like, or that they're starting to be able to like in the open. I'm going to hope that it's literary. I'm going to hope that it's the unmistakable literary quality of a lot of what he wrote. Joel Swagman says, the Huckleberry Finn question. Forgive me if this has been asked before. As you know, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn has often been called the greatest American novel. It has been. It's true. Is that the Huckleberry Finn question? I thought the Huckleberry Finn question dealt with political correctness. Is it as great as all of the critics say, or has it been overpraised? It has been overpraised. It is a fantastic novel. Fantastic. The main legitimate criticism of it, in the 21st century, you will only hear illegitimate criticism of it. And the 21st century is fixing to ban it from schools. That hasn't quite happened yet. It has happened in some schools. But by the end of the 21st century, no one will read Huck Finn anymore. And anyone who reads it, even in private, will be branded a racist. But that's illegitimate criticism. That's stupid criticism. That's fascist criticism. The legitimate criticism of it is that Twain obviously loses the thread about halfway through the book. That's pretty serious. That's pretty serious as a flaw. You'll be reading it and you'll be thinking, wait a minute. No. I mean, I don't want to tell you what to do, Mr. Mark Twain, but obviously this is not how the book... No, you've gone off track here. I myself, I tend to discount that a lot. I think if you're going to credit somebody with literary genius, you should probably credit them with the knowledge of what they're doing. I think that Huck Finn holds together better than a lot of critics who've made that contention say. I think the reason they say it is because they don't like the direction it takes, not because they seriously think that it goes off the rails. But one way or another, it has been drastically overpraised, which is really bad for any author. The overpraise with Huck Finn started with Ernest Hemingway, with a line that Hemingwayites can recite. They'll have it carved on their tombstone. They recite the master's words rather than think for themselves. And Hemingway was one of the first ones to overpraise this book egregiously, just hugely, stupidly overpraised it. And it's just continued from there. And, I often want to say to people in the 21st century, where the only thing that happens in the 21st century is overpraise. And I always want to say to the recipients of that, I want to say quietly to Sally Rooney, because if I say it publicly, I'll be executed legally. If you criticize Sally Rooney, you can be executed legally in 175 countries. But if I could, Samizdat style, maybe circulate the word, I would say to her, you really don't want to be overpraised. It's bad for you. In the short term, maybe not, but in the long term, definitely. I often want to say that to her, but even this is enough. Interpol is already on its way to my IP address because of even this tempered criticism of Sally Rooney. So I'll just move on to the next question. Andrew Russell says, do you still rate David Mitchell as highly acclaimed author, or do you think he has fallen from grace since his 2020 release Utopia Avenue, which received some negative feedback / reviews? I didn't think Utopia Avenue was a complete success, but he's still a very major author, yes. Freeman Frida says, it is generally accepted dogma that City on the Edge of Forever is the best episode of Star Trek, the original series. Oh, right. I think I answered this question. Yes, it is generally accepted as the greatest episode of the original series. It's also the greatest episode of any franchise of Star Trek, and it doesn't need to be generally agreed to be that if I'm the one who says it. And I say it. It's the best episode of any Star Trek franchise. A lot of great episodes, none better than City on the Edge of Forever. What is the worst episode? Right, okay, for me it's Spectre of the Gun or Cat's Paw from the original series. And we had an exchange about this, and you could very well be right. I think Spectre of the Gun has some fantastic character moments in it, even though it is patently ridiculous. And, of course, everything in Cat's Paw is patently ridiculous in a cartoony kind of way. But I wanted to point out just the general agreement on this subject is that the episode called Spock's Brain is the worst episode of Star Trek. At least Star Trek, the original series. There is a contender for worst episode of the entire franchise, and that is a notorious episode of Star Trek Voyager in which Captain Janeway de-evolves into a slug. The less said about that, the better. I'll get to that when we get to Voyager in Book Trek 2021. But I believe, I think if you watch Cat's Paw, for the fun of it, it's a fun episode. And then you watch Spock's Brain, which is very much not fun. They're equally bad, but you have the element of fun missing. I think if you were to watch them both back to back today, you would probably agree that Spock's Brain is worse. Anyway, let's see here. Alan says, hi Steve, I know you love space, but you're not a fan of flying. So my question is this, you win a free trip on Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin in a local raffle, £1 entry. Do you go or send Deb into space instead? I wouldn't want cosmic ray radiation to mutate Deb into anything worse than she already is. But if I think these things are obscene. This whole thing is obscene. There isn't, aside from a few venues where the library director goes to bat with the town council to get his librarians a living wage, a wage that is commensurate with the enormous value they provide to the community. Unless you have a library director who is able to do that, then, to use just one example, every single librarian in the country is drastically overpaid. All teachers, all public school teachers are drastically underpaid. And this handful of megalomaniacal lunatics are funneling hundreds of millions of dollars into vanity projects to send them into space. I wouldn't go. Anyway, I mean, the whole thing's obscene anyway, but I wouldn't go even so. If I'm not going to take a plane, I'm not going to take a spaceship into low orbit. No way. KMM says, I know that you often clean up and or repair some of the used books that you acquire. Yeah, it's necessary. Usually, I mean, when I say I repair a book, usually what I'm doing is shoring up the cover. I don't have a glue gun or anything like that. I don't have the ability to shore up a physical book. If a book is actually cracked, then I can't do anything about it. But usually that's not the case. Usually, if it's a hardcover, old book, it's the dust jacket that will be the worst for wear, and that can be fixed so that it's sturdy. But anyway, what is your quick recommendation on how to remove stickers from a book, mainly paperbacks? Yes. I have a much better success rate with this than most people. It takes patience. The number one thing is you can't peel the sticker off the book. That will certainly damage the book, or it won't work. The sticker will just fragment apart into a million pieces. What you have to do essentially is get underneath one or two edges, contiguous edges of the sticker, and move it off the cover. Sort of slide it. You're sort of sliding it off the cover. That way you're not working against the adhesive. If you pick at one of the covers and then try and peel the thing off the way it was put on, it won't work. Usually it doesn't work. My success has come in dislodging one part of the sticker from the cover and then sort of slowly, patiently, forcefully rubbing it off the cover. Very tedious, very time consuming, very stupid that people do this. But anyway, let's the local Goodwill, which is really our only local used book place, puts very stubborn price stickers on the books. Yeah, some stickers are much worse than others. Some just don't come off. They come off easy sometimes, but other times, especially on the paperbacks, they ruin the cover of the book with the removal process. Yeah, I sympathize. I sympathize. Thanks. Enjoy every minute of your videos. I haven't made the $85 Amazon. Oh, right. The $85 Amazon plunge for The Light of Their Eyes yet. I showed you a book the other day, a new book. I shouldn't have. I didn't know I was going to be torturing all of you. I showed you a book from the 18th century, an 18th century rabbi, a collection of his homilies on the Torah called The Lights of Their Eyes. First ever full-length annotated English language translation of this great work of Hasidism. And I had no idea when I held that book up on camera that it was $85 on Amazon. I had no idea that that was the case. I'm not trying to bankrupt you people. I'm not, I promise. It just looked, to me, incredibly interesting. It's a sweet spot of mine. Biblical commentary, exegesis of any kind, is a sweet spot of mine. It looked incredibly interesting. I completely forgot the kind of viewers that I tend to attract on this channel, where it's got to seem really enticing to you too, only you're not getting a copy in the mail for free. You'd have to pay $85 for it. Sorry about that. Well, I totally agree about stickers. Totally. I much prefer places that don't do it. I don't know why they do, except to keep the staff busy. You could just say all paperbacks are $1. Even the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut, my beloved Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut, has a policy that all paperbacks are $1. And yet every paperback has a $1 sticker on it. Not the same thing as, for instance, the Brattle bookshop here in Boston, where the books outside are $1, $3, and $5. So there it is necessary to have stickers on them to differentiate between those. But if all the books are the same price, if the Brattle said, for instance, every book in this lot is $2, then there'd be no reason to sticker them, I would think. But maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about that. One way or another. Naute18 says, thanks for this. I often wonder what happens to the saintly Frida when you go brattling or such in downtown Boston. Do you leave her with someone, or does she stay on her own in your cottage? I don't leave her with anybody. No, she stays on her own here when I have to leave. I have to go to appointments in Boston. Once upon a time in the past, I have certainly left dogs in the care of others, even hired others. And I confess that has sort of changed, or maybe it's just Frida. Maybe it's just the way I feel about Frida, but I wouldn't. The only way that I would ever leave her in someone else's care would be if the someone else was dead. And that's it, on the whole of the earth. So every once in a while, when we visited up in Vermont, I've left her at the house. In early visits, I left her at the house so that Mark and I could go gallivanting, in the truck. And although I enjoyed the gallivanting, I was obsessively thinking about her the whole time. And in the last few visits that we paid up to Vermont, one of the many great things about Vermont is that dogs are family. I lost track of how many people have said some variation of that to us when we've popped in and asked if it's okay if I bring Frida in. She's incredibly friendly. She's unbelievably cute. She's not loud or destructive. She would never pee or poop or piddle or chew on anything inside a shop. She's perfectly well behaved. And every Vermont place says yes. So in the last few visits, I have had the absolute ultimate freedom of gallivanting with Mark in the truck with Frida, which means I don't have anything pulling me back home at all. We went to the Book Barn with Frida on the hottest day of the year. It was fantastic. It's fantastic. It reminded me actually of all the times that I was traveling, where I wasn't worried about my loved ones because they were all with me. That is a luxury I don't think I would have in too many other places than Vermont. But anyway, you had follow-up questions, right? It would have to be Deb. And Deb right now is in Maine. I hear rumors on the street that she is coming back at the end of August, probably to spend the autumn in Boston. If that's the case, if she's up for it, there are some places in Boston that I would like to visit that would be totally extraneous. So I would have to. It would be just leaving Frida, and the only way I would do that is if Deb was parked here, you know, canoodling with the little princess and enjoying the Wi-Fi while I was gone. But it would have to be someone else. It would have to be someone else who thinks about dogs the same way I do, and Deb does. So, but anyway, you had follow-up questions. If the latter, does she behave? I'm curious because our late schnauzers suffered from severe separation anxiety and would tear the house apart when they were left alone. They were adopted from a shelter, hence. Okay, I don't know what that means. All right, let's be careful about stigmatizing shelter dogs. It doesn't follow one-to-one with a hence that a dog that's adopted from a shelter will have severe separation anxiety. Not at all. Let's not add to the fad of ascribing mental problems to dogs just as a matter of fact if they come from a shelter. Separation anxiety can happen to anybody. Have you ever taken Frida on the subway, and if so, how did she behave? Well, she behaves just fine, but she doesn't like it. She doesn't like the subway at all. I brought her home on the subway, but she doesn't like it at all. I kind of dreamed in the first year that we knew each other. I kind of dreamed of her just strutting onto the subway and ordering people to pet her and it being no big deal. But she doesn't enjoy it. She actively knows what's going on and she doesn't like it. So I try to limit it. You and Frida are so adorable together, and I wish you many more years. Well, yes, I wish you were in the video now, but she pranced off. She's within sight, but she's not on her perch. She doesn't experience separation anxiety. No, she doesn't like it when I'm not here, but she doesn't go crazy. She doesn't do things or destroy things. She's never destroyed anything. She doesn't, even as a puppy, she doesn't chew on anything. She doesn't tear apart anything. She doesn't even move anything. My Basset Lucy, for the last 10 years of her life, used to move things. I used to call her the world's slowest poltergeist because she would pick something up with the full intention in her tiny little ill-lit brain of tearing it to shreds. But then that was too much effort. She was kind of tired. So she would just waddle with it to some other place, and I would find it in that other place. But Frida doesn't even do that. She has no interest. She doesn't roam around the place. She doesn't find things to chew or destroy. Nothing like that. And as far as I know, she doesn't make a whole lot of noise if I leave her here alone. I try not to. I leave her as seldom as I can. I would love to take her with me on the subway a lot more often than I do. But my one hope along those lines is that maybe when she's a little bit older, typically dogs who are all uptight about X, Y, or Z when they're 4 years old aren't so caring about it when they're 6. And I'll give it a try and see, because I have a lot of places I'd like to go with her. Let's see here. Steve Watson says, quite a few booktubers have done videos on US versus UK Euro covers, and they seem to prefer the UK one. So do I. Visual sensibilities, maybe even the budget, are usually better. The design is better, usually. Question number 1, why do publishers feel it necessary to do different covers for different regions? Well, a lot of times it's just that they have their own art department. So why have that art department if you're going to inherit somebody else's art? And there's a territoriality involved. There might be copyright issues involved. It's not always just whim. And number 2, which covers do you tend to prefer and why? I tend to prefer UK covers. They tend to be much, much better. Somebody sent me a picture the other day of a pile of books inspired by this channel, and the one on top was The Reckoning by Charles Nicholl in a, I assume, UK Picador trade paperback that I've never seen before, 10 times more beautiful than any version of the book that I've ever seen. I was almost tempted to go online and see if I could find a copy of that particular cover in that particular paperback, because it's a great book. Yeah, I almost always prefer the UK Euro covers. Candy says, hello, Steve. I would like to ask where I should start with Georgette Heyer, Sir Walter Scott, and Samuel Johnson. Would you also mind recommending some introductory nonfiction and fiction about Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra trio? Well, okay. These aren't really Q&A questions, but for Georgette Heyer, you would want to decide, first of all, do you want to start with a romance or a murder mystery? She wrote really good books in both genres, so it would depend on which you wanted there. So Walter Scott, you would probably want to pick one of his big popular novels. Ivanhoe is typically the perfect place to start with him. He did a lot of really interesting work that isn't those, but those would be a good place to start. Those were clearly written for the masses. Samuel Johnson, well, with Johnson, I would recommend starting with Wikipedia, or find a couple of, the big Penguin collected Johnson or the big Oxford World Classics collected Johnson, and read the introduction. Read the notes, read the afterword or the forward or whatever. Get to know the world of Johnson before you dig in, and before you dig into his literature. Might even suggest a really good abridgment of Boswell's Life of Johnson before you get to his own literature, which is my way of saying that of the three authors that you name here, he has aged the worst. His literature has aged the worst. Frida, come here. Everybody wants to see you, baby. Come here, baby. You want to come up on your perch? Shuffin needs exorbitant encouragement to jump up on the couch. Come here. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right, there you go. Hello, baby. They're all asking about you. They are. They're all asking about you. How's my baby been? There you go. All right. You have something else to look at now. Where were we? It's nice having a dog who can get anywhere. My pointer, Malin, could jump anywhere, but she was afraid to do it, and Lucy required a forklift to get her anywhere. Lucy would have loved to lay on top of a couch like that and look out at the world, but it would have taken 5 people to get her up there, and God knows the drama of getting her back down again. So anyway, oh, right. Candy is requesting lots of recommendations for stuff. There are lots of great books on Julius Caesar. There are lots of great books on Cleopatra, including Stacy Schiff's biography. I strongly recommend that. There aren't any equivalently great books on Mark Antony, and I don't know why. There should be. He's a fascinating character, and we have an endless amount of documentation for him. But I don't have a book like, for instance, there are 5 books on Julius Caesar that I could point you to and say, perfect place to read. Going to keep your interest, going to be totally scholarly. There are 2 or 3 on Cleopatra, mainly Stacy Schiff. I could point to that immediately for anyone who's never read anything about her. Mark Antony? No. Can't do the same thing. I wish I could. But feel free to email me. If we're gonna talk specifics on these or any other subjects, feel free to email me. I'll leave my email on every video. That's not a merch store. That's not a fake or dummy email. It's not like I check that once a week. That's my inbox. So, and I'm happy to field recommendations. Just be patient. I get lots of emails every day, but I'm happy to field recommendations. And as one of you pointed out in an email, I said, you could always tell people that the extra bonus that they get for being patient with you is that in addition to recommending a book, you're probably going to send it to them. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yes. Let's see here. Anthony Suppa says, where did your penguin wall go? Seems like it just disappeared one day. Well, there was a massive move, a massive change here at Hyde Cottage, and that required every book coming off the shelves, required all the shelves coming down, required a large amount of hemming and hawing and cleaning and wall scrubbing and whatnot. And I was ready for that because my penguin wall, the whole wall at the back of a room, had a lot of duplication on it. It had a lot of things that were only there because they were Penguin Classics. It had a lot of things that were there several times. And once I got rid of all that, my Penguin Classic wall became a Penguin Classic bookcase the way it was for most of the time that I had books. There is now a Penguin Classic bookcase in my little book room, but it's not a wall anymore. I don't foresee it ever getting back to a wall. There was a while there where I just bought every Penguin that I found, and there's no need for that. I noticed I used to go to that Penguin wall all the time to use it for research and for companionship. But I noticed that when I was doing that, I wasn't visiting all the books. I was visiting a certain number of books, about 150. And that is still true. And they are still here. But once that gigantic change was happening, I took advantage of that to just pull everything off the shelves and rearrange everything that needed rearranging. And the Penguins were one of those. Also, have you ever made a visit to the Brattle without buying anything? The Brattle is a used bookstore in Boston. If you're brand new to the channel, you might not know that I've been going there for years. I've been doing Brattle book hauls for years on this channel. And I was going there for decades before there was such a thing as BookTube or the internet, or most of you. And every once in a while, I think probably 3 times in the whole time I've been going to the Brattle, I will come away without anything at all. It's very, very, very rare. For those of you who don't know the place I'm talking about, in addition to being a big stocked used bookstore, it also has a sale lot outside that's thousands of books for $1, $3, $5. Under those circumstances, it's pretty tough to have a visit and come away with nothing. And so I almost never have. I think 3 times is the total number of times. There have been a couple of times over the decades where I came away with something without paying for it. Just because I would go to the Brattle before I had a cell phone with 1,000 books on it. I would always have a book in my hand. I would always be carrying a book in addition to a shoulder bag. And there were plenty of times, a couple of times where I went to the Brattle. You get lost. I get lost in browsing those outside carts. I just go into a world of my own. And I pick books out of the carts as I'm going along, rather than trust that I'll remember where they were. And there have been times where I only found 1 book, or maybe 2 books. So I had, they were cupped in my hand along with the 1 book I brought with me. And then I finish and think, oh, that was kind of disappointing. I got to get going. I just wander off. I just wander off with all 3 books. Unfortunately, the Brattle has not seen fit to ban me and put my face on the front door because I go back in and pay for them. I'm mortified. I go back in and pay for them, but I've almost never walked away with nothing. Rena is reading says, is a Star Trek-esque MacGuffin? If a Star Trek-esque MacGuffin turned people into dogs, what breed would it translate Steve Donoghue to be? Hybrids are acceptable. Well, I take as an implicit compliment here that you're not saying I'm already one. I've lost count of how many times I've been walking dogs over the decades. When we encounter a small child in a stroller or something, and the child points and says, 1 dog, 2 dog, 3 dog, and then they point at me and say, 4 dog. I've lost count of how many times that's happened. And I was raised and socialized by them. I share a lot in common with them mentally and also physiologically. But if we allow that I am human, at least borderline human, I think it'd probably be beagles. Probably it would be beagles. James Holder says, how are your year-end Steve Reads lists coming along? Oh, they're percolating just fine. What books have stood out to you so far, either for the best or worst list, as well as the genre list? Well, yes, you would have to read those lists to find out, wouldn't you? There'd be precious little point in making those lists if I was blurting out stuff like this ahead of time. Now would there? But those lists are percolating along. For those who don't know what James is talking about, every year at the end of the year, I sum up the year in American new releases in the 15 or 16 different genres that I read. Books in translation, fiction debut, general nonfiction, fiction, science fiction, mystery, romance, historical fiction, science, nature, biography, history, a wide range of popular genres. A large amount of reading goes into those lists, and every year at the end of the year I make a list of the best and worst books of the year that I roll out in December. And it starts off with all of the minor categories, the smaller genre categories, best of. And it culminates every year with the only 4 lists that anybody really cares about, which is worst fiction, best fiction, then worst nonfiction, and best fiction. And in those lists, the lists are not ordered except that the number 1 entry in every category is the number 1 entry. It is either the best or the worst thing in that category. None of the other are numbered, and there is, I might point out, a vast backlog of these things online that you can easily find. That have not only my listing, but my rationale. So the lists are coming along just fine. In June and early July, I realized that the year was half done, so the list should be half done, just statistically speaking. Now that's a little bit fungible because the publishing industry is not half and half. The publishing industry in America is heavily freighted for the autumn and winter. A lot of major releases don't come out until then, so I'm leaving a little bit of leeway for that. But even so, I figured that in late June and early July, at the very latest, 5 places on every one of those lists should be relatively surely locked down. A little bit of leeway in case a huge amount is dumped in that genre later in the year, but still 4 or 5 places should be relatively locked in place for the year. So that took a lot of time to do. It was a lot of fun to do. There are still places open, of course. There will be places open right to the end. Let's see here. Lulu Bobble says, "Hi Steve, are you doing us the kindness of reading all, as you are doing us all the kindness of reading all the Trump books? What's your take on whether he will run for president again? Will America or the world ever be rid of him and the damage he has done?" Well, we're trying to keep these questions nice and friendly. We'll end with this one for this segment here. If he is alive and not in jail, he will run again in 2024. Yes. And as to whether or not the world will be free of him, keep in mind, I don't know why he would run. I don't know why the Republican machinery would support him. Actually, that's not true. I'm going to try not to rant. The logical question of why the Republican machinery would support him in a run for president is a mystery, because he's a loser. He backs candidates who lose. He lost himself. He lost the Senate. He lost the House. He lost the White House. His name is toxic to a large swath of America. So why they would back him for a presidential run, I have no idea, except I do know, and that is that they are personally, physically afraid of his brown shirts, of his Klan supporters, of his base. That's why ranking Republicans, elected Republican officials in the Republican Party, that's why they'll support him enthusiastically, because they are physically afraid of being killed or having their children be killed by his followers. But other than that, there would be no practical reason. He doesn't swing elections, but he is certainly going to run. And your second question, will the world ever be rid of him and the damage he's done? No, it won't. All right, so we're gonna wrap that up on a downer of a note, but we'll be back for part 3.